Hello, my friends, and welcome again to Soul Channel, where we cultivate clarity, raise consciousness, normalize spirituality, and change the world. I'm so excited for today. One of my dear friends from the UK is going to share her wisdom with us, and you all know how much I love it when we get to hear new perspectives in a new way. It opens so many doors. Gina Gardner is a phenomenal radio host, soon a multiple award-winning author, and I first met her over a year ago when I was a guest on her show. So I'm so excited to have her with us today. Let me share a little bit about her. Gina is a multiple #1 international best-selling author, motivational, and radical change catalyst speaker, syndicated radio host, empowerment and transformational leadership trainer and coach with over 30 years of experience. She is a master strategist helping individuals achieve happiness, success, fulfillment, and business leaders achieve and sustain high levels of holistic, profitable success. Gina's gift is that she has the ability to see more in people than they see in themselves. She's able to direct them to a purpose that is bigger than they thought possible for themselves. She guides them in their journey to make it a reality and to become a truly enlightened leader. So welcome, Gina. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be with you on this show. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and I can't wait because I know we've had a few conversations, and I'm so excited to have the audience feel into what you're going to share today. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I've been passionate about helping people step into their powers since from when I can remember. I started off life as a teacher, and it was really the first time I felt as if I truly belonged and I'd found my thing. I was very quickly promoted, and I became the deputy principal of a large school at the age of 28. And I was promoted directly to be the catalyst for change. I was the youngest bar two on the staff.
Wow.
Incidentally, the then acting deputy had been told not to apply because they were going to appoint a man. So she was not very well pleased when I was appointed. And we spent the first 6 months really strategizing and putting things in place to start to create change. Because although the school was considered a good school, most of its teaching focus and methods were very, very much focused on things which were post-war, and they hadn't really changed in that 20, 30 years. And most of the staff had been there since they started teaching. And as I say, I was 28 and I was the youngest bar two. And I went off in the February half term. We have a week off then to go skiing, which was something I loved to do. And in those days, it was the done thing to have skis as long as possible. And I had new skis for Christmas, and I proceeded to wrap that extra 10 centimeters around my neck most of the week. And on the Thursday, I had a really bad fall, and I'd split my brand new ski suit from thigh to ankle. And so I'd said to my friends, tomorrow I'm going to get my confidence back. You go off. I'm going to go and do some gentle skis, some green and some red runs, and I'll meet you for lunch. When I met them for lunch, they said, we found this fabulous new run, come with us. And it was one of those beautiful days where the sun is shining. And so off we went after lunch, up on the chairlift. The mountains were glistening off round the corner, and then suddenly they stopped. And it was pretty evident that we were not where they thought we should be. So instead of being on a 6-kilometer red run, we were on a black diamond run with 6-foot moguls.
Wow.
No, I'd skied black runs before, but these were monster moguls. And so I skied the first third and then I had a fall. And then it took me about 20 minutes to work my way down to where the others were sitting, each on a mogul, rather like an elf or sitting on a mushroom. Everybody had taken their skis off. They were all smokers. They were having what they called a bindings check, which was actually an opportunity to have a smoke. I'd never smoked, but I took off my skis and was sitting there in the sunshine when suddenly the top of my mogul gave way and there was nowhere to land. It was so steep and so full of these moguls. And the last thing I remember was a scream, which was me, and then everything blacked out.
Oh no.
And I came to, and I'm told I fell between 150 and 200 feet. And it took them some time to ski to me. The good thing was that with the two falls and the bit of skiing that I'd done, I was pretty well at the bottom. And I was determined not to get the blood wagon. So with their help, I managed to get back to the hotel, but I was in quite a state. And we travelled home the next day, and my mum took one look at me, and I was rushed off to accident and emergency, and I got a bad concussion and I'd trapped a nerve. And so it took me about 3 weeks to get back to school. But I was then due to go as a deputy leader on the borough ski party. We had 150 odd pupils. And I was allowed to go because we've got a medic with us and went off skiing. But as the week went on, I became more and more like Quasimodo. And on the last evening, I said to my colleagues, I've just got to go and lie down. And within a very few minutes, I found that I was paralyzed down one side. Now, the children were around in the hallway. I didn't want to frighten them. And so I had to wait until somebody came to check on me. And I have to say, it was a very long few minutes. I have no idea how long it was. It felt like a lifetime. And I was immediately carted off to hospital. And it took me several months to get back to school. But I got back a few weeks before we were due to finish for the summer term. I wasn't right, but I was looking forward to the 6 week school holiday, thinking I've got an opportunity to get on an even keel to recover, because all I was doing was sleeping in school.
Wow.
10 days into the holiday, very early in the morning, I got a phone call, and it was my principal or head teacher's wife, and she was hysterical. She had discovered that John Hughes, lovely man, who was the principal, he'd died in his sleep. And so far from it being a relaxing holiday, I helped her organise the funeral. I had to let the staff, the pupils, the parents know, the local authority, and prepare for September because I was now acting head. And I was appointed to be the permanent head in the January of 1984. Now, I was the head of that school for just over 20 years. And for the most part, I ran the school from a wheelchair. I had periods after 2 failed back surgery where I was completely wheelchair bound, but times when I could do a little bit of walking. And I was determined that the school was not going to suffer because of my limitations. And so I had to find a way where, because I couldn't physically get into the classrooms, I couldn't get through the doorway of most, and even those I could get through the doorway, I couldn't get round them. So I had to find a way where the staff would take radical responsibility for their own performance and a shared responsibility for the team. It was incredibly successful, and the school achieved lots of kite marks. We were on the one of the 100 best schools in the country list, done by Her Majesty's Inspector twice during my tenure. We were invited to be a beacon school, so I shared the process and the principles that I'd used with hundreds of other teachers and many other schools. And where that it was adopted, it was just as successful in those schools as it was in my own. And I did a number of external roles, partly because our budget was so awful. So I worked for the National College of Leadership and the London Institute as a trainer facilitator. I worked as an Ofsted inspector, and I worked as a workforce reform advisor for the government. Not all at once. I was because I didn't want to spend too much time out of school. And apart from the absolute face-to-face contact of those, I did all of the other work in my own time. Because one of the things I discovered is that work was great pain control. When I was focused on what I was doing, I didn't feel the body. I'd switched the body off, but it was taking a toll. The school was doing incredibly well, but I physically wasn't. And I was given an ultimatum in May 2004, that I couldn't continue working a 15, 16-hour day. I had to do something different, otherwise I'd be completely housebound. And so I made the very difficult decision that I was going to retire. And about the time when I retired, I had an internal spinal stimulator fitted, which is like an internal TEMS machine. But I was very poorly after that was fitted. During the process, they nicked the dura, and so I was leaking spinal fluid. And so by the time I came out of hospital, I was already retired. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? Daytime television doesn't do it for me. I'd got all of this experience, all of this expertise. What was I going to do?
Yeah.
So I took myself off to do a research project across industry, because my belief was that the issues that we faced in education were no different. The widgets might be, but leadership for me was the same, because people are people. And we'd had our own, we'd had responsibility for budgets for some years. My budget was about £1.5 million, £1.75 million. I employed 100 people. We were responsible for everything under LMS in those days. And what I discovered, I looked at two issues. How did people develop emerging leaders? And how did they grow and develop senior leaders? And of course, the issues were the same. It didn't matter what industry. And I had a wide spread of industry. And so I wrote my first couple of books, and they became a calling card. And so between 2005 and the recession 2008, beginning of 2009, most of my work was with corporates, doing training, facilitation, coaching, mentoring. Although I've always done life coaching, and did life coaching when I was a serving head, both formally and informally. And then the recession 2008-9 hit. And within a week, I'd lost every one of my contracts for the year, because the first thing that corporates do when there is a recession, mistakenly in my belief, they cut their training and development budget.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
By this time, I was doing some visiting lecturing for Essex University Business School, and they would commission me either to work with representatives from a group of companies, or to go in and do some focused work with specific companies. And I was always invited back. And so I contacted those, and I started to work with them on a retainer basis, and looking at how they could develop themselves as leaders, always work with the senior leaders, and then how to develop people within their organization. And without exception, every business that I've worked with for more than 10 months has become significantly more profitable, but they've done it in a holistic way. They've done it by becoming enlightened leaders, leading themselves first. And so I was doing that and was very successful, but I had this burning sense that my purpose was to reach more people. And so
Nice.
I
So let
started.
me stop you here, because oh my gosh, I just want to get up and give you a big hug and shake your hand, and what a journey. I want to first honor your resiliency, your strength, and your commitment to move in and make a difference regardless of your physical situation. So as you're moving into this new, and I have another client that I've coached who also had physical challenges, and similarly, it was, how do you manage the pain? How do you keep going and manage the pain? And so what I'm hearing you say is you used it to inform yourself on how you could be of best service. Your condition, your disability, your lack of mobility was the genesis for these brilliant leadership and operational ideas that empowered other people to step into their greatness. And
I think that's true. Necessity is the mother of invention, isn't it? That
yeah,
ultimately you find different ways to do things. And I think the huge gift in my disability, and I do see it as a gift, was that I had to find a way that I'm sure was going to be different than had I been, fully able-bodied.
yeah,
I'm sure I would have been too interfering. That, like so many leaders do, they don't trust their people to take radical responsibility. They micromanage. And in doing so, not only do they disable their people and themselves to be strategic because they're too busy doing everybody else's stuff. There's only one way,
yeah,
and only I can do it properly. I'd like to think I would have had the same approach as I created. However, I'm honest enough to know that if I had done it, it would have taken a lot longer, and it would have
yeah,
been through a series of aha moments. I had to I had to hit the ground running because I was determined that the school wasn't going to suffer.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, I think that ultimately, once you take on the principle that we are each responsible, and that if you set things up right, that you have a clear vision which you share, that you
hmm,
have a mission and shared values that are spoken about, and not just the words, because we have a blueprint for those words, but your blueprint and my blueprint for excellence, I suspect yours and mine are probably pretty
pretty
close.
similar. Yeah,
They're not always. And then what behaviors need to be in place for those values to be honored?
yeah,
And when you've got a shared blueprint where it's part of everyday conversation, then excellence begins to be meaningful.
right,
But so often leaders say, I need it, I'm striving for excellence. Well, what does that look like, sound like, feel like? Or
yeah,
they'll say, that's not good enough. And the person's left thinking, but I don't know what good enough looks like. I don't know how to move from where I am to good enough. And
yeah,
so those processes came out of the necessity of having a situation where people could absolutely run with things because they understood the communication was two-way, and they really understood what excellence looked like in the context of whichever aspect of school we were talking about. And the
right,
principles are the same for every business.
yeah, yeah, I agree. And then for you to take that after retirement into an even bigger audience and broader audience, I'm Gina, my hat's off, because people strive to do that in the microcosm, and you've got this thread through your whole life of empowering others with the wisdom you've gained. And I just want to, you know, hats off, because it's brilliant. You don't often find somebody who's completely selfless and who says, this is what I've learned. Let me tell you, let me show you, let me share with you. And in my humble opinion, I think if we had more of that, we'd have a very different landscape in corporate America. And so now that you're post recession in the early to mid 2000s, right? Like 2010, 9, 10. How does that then start to grow again for you? Because
So the interesting thing was that I had a way in because the initial companies I worked with, but I work very much with an empowerment model. So once the businesses are thriving, I retreat. I'm always there if they need me, but I don't stay. My model is I go on to the next one and the next one.
yeah,
And so I had a way in, but within 18 months, 2 years, I didn't ever have to sell myself or advertise or market. It was word of mouth, which worked incredibly well until the pandemic. And then it
Mm.
just happened that all of the companies I was working with were closed down by the government because of
Oh,
the type of
yep.
company that they were. But prior to that, I'd already got this sense that the quality of leadership post that last recession, I felt did a nosedive. That people were so focused on profits
Hmm.
and making a buck that they had forgotten that people were their treasure. And
Yeah.
so they were setting targets that were unmanageable, and people were getting burnt out, that the quality of leadership was poor, and that the levels of stress were going up. In 2019 in the UK, billion pounds, so we're talking probably what, 90 billion dollars, was
Hmm.
lost from days off because of stress.
Oh my
And
goodness.
140 billion, which is seen as a conservative estimate, was lost because of people being present but not firing on all cylinders because of stress. Presenteeism is a new word. I mean, I'd never heard of it
Yeah.
before. And
Yeah.
I'd not only had I coached uh, leaders and business owners, because they're not always the same thing, because you've got leaders within corporate, haven't you, that don't own the business, but also people on the receiving end. And
Yeah.
time again, people were stressed because they didn't feel valued, because they were consistently being pressured to achieve the unachievable, that technology and boundaries between home life and working life had been eroded, and people were getting to the point where their physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being was hugely challenged. And so I had, as I say, this burning sense that I had the experience and the skill set to make a difference. I can't say
Yeah.
it was comfortable. It would have been much more comfortable to be a lady what lunched, but you know,
I can't imagine you doing that.
it's nice occasionally, but I couldn't do it all the time. And so I spent the pandemic writing more books, and creating programs that could be done online, um, getting together an accredited extended leadership program. Because when you look around the world, it's not just America that's suffering because the quality of leadership is iffy. We've got our own problems in the UK, and you've only got to look around the world to know that if
Yeah.
we are to survive as a human race with any sense of possibility, if we are to have a planet that can sustain us, then the quality of leadership has got to change. And so I have an audacious mission, which is to positively impact on at least 1 million leaders in the next 3 years through the development of enlightened leadership. And for me, that means leading with integrity, being authentic, walking the talk, being the role model, leading with compassion and kindness. And that's not pink and fluffy, because
Yeah.
when people know you care about them, and that when you are giving developmental feedback, which is saying, Teresa, that's not your best. I know
Yeah.
you can do better than that. It's seen as that I want you to be the best you can be, and I care, rather than I'm having a go at you.
Hmm.
And then
Yep.
the last thing is the courage to take decisions that are difficult, and to recognize that for me, purpose is about being of service. So, what living legacy am I going to leave? And every word that we speak or not, how we speak it, every word, every action we take, every thought that we have, all of our beliefs leave a living legacy for ourselves and others.
Right.
And I think the best way to describe that is to just use one small word. And I want you, if you're listening and watching this, think about the energy behind the word. It's the same word. So if I said, oh, Teresa, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. they have a very different meaning and they leave a very different legacy. And the
Yeah.
tone of our voice is just one small example of how we can leave a legacy that can build people up or it can destroy them.
And that leads us into something that you and I have talked a lot about, how who we are being is the most influence we can have on everyone in our life. And in corporate America, who we are being is essential to that enlightened leader, right?
Who we are being, and I think this is global.
Mhm.
It's not geographically based. You know, how we turn up moment by moment makes the difference. And I think lots of people talk about the fact, well, there's only me. You know, what am I? How can I influence things? But every choice we make moment by moment has consequences,
Yeah,
and there are consequences for us and for other people. And even not making an active choice has consequences. You know, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said, all it takes for evil to persist is for good men to stay silent.
right.
And in today's word, for good people to stay silent, because women, I think, have a huge role to play in the future development and potential of the world. And so I think ultimately, you know, if you spend the room a night in a room with a mosquito, you can't tell me that something very small isn't having a profound effect, because that
Yeah.
persistent buzz
What a
really
great
gets through.
analogy. Oh my gosh, I love that.
And we have the power to not only impact on our own life, you know, what's the voice that's going on in people's head?
Yeah,
Is it a voice that empowers you, or is it telling you you shouldn't, that you're no good, that you're not enough? Because when you feel that you're enough, that vibration impacts on other people. We've all spent time with those that, you know, you spend half an hour with them and you feel that you've been put through the ringer. I call them energy vampires.
yeah,
But equally, you've spent time with energy batteries, people who you feel empowered and enlightened. Everything feels lighter because you spent time in their company.
yeah,
And so we have the capacity, by how we turn up moment by moment, to make a difference. Smiling at somebody, saying hello, saying, how are you? And really listening to the
yeah,
answer. How are you really?
yeah. I've always believed, and it's something that continually is proven, that self-worth is an epidemic larger than anything we've encountered. And our first opportunity as a species, as the human species, is to address confidence and self-worth. Because when we stand confidently in who we are being, we don't have to have all the answers.
No.
We can lean into people who may bring alternative perspectives, new information, and take us into places that we couldn't have imagined. And this model of collaboration is vital, but it has to start with the leader feeling self-confident.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that whoever you are, whether you are in a formal leadership position, or you are somebody who's not working at all, doesn't
Yeah,
matter. You are the leader of your life. And if you hand over the responsibility to other people for how you're feeling, which many people do within any relationship, you know, he made me feel unhappy, she made me angry. Well, they can
yeah,
only do that if you give them permission. When you take that control of yourself, you don't need to control other people. You don't
yeah,
need to be nasty or critical to make yourself feel better, because wobbly bits and all, you recognize that in your imperfections, you are perfect. That doesn't mean that you can't strive to be the better version of yourself, the even better version. And for
yeah,
me, we are card carrying students of life. and that
Mhm.
we have the capacity to learn about ourselves and our interaction with the world every single day. And the
Yes,
interesting thing for me is we usually learn more when things aren't going right than when we do when everything's wonderful. And so
that's
instead of being terrified of change and being really in victim mode about the challenges in life, what
yeah.
can they teach you?
Yep. That's exactly where I was going to go, because you don't want to invalidate the things that we perceive as hard or difficult or challenging. They are as much a part of the landscape of your learning as that class, that workshop, that YouTube video. As a matter of fact, they're far more informative because, we've got a visitor, because you're going to remember, because you're going to feel it. You're going
Yeah.
to feel the motions that go along with the challenge that you're faced. And if you look at that challenge as an opportunity, what is this teaching me? What do I get to learn from this opportunity? It becomes powerful, magical.
I think one of the things that concerns me when I look at what's going on is the how many people are struggling to feel resourced and resilient.
Yeah.
And because of that, the door of possibility is closed.
Yeah.
If you are in that place where you feel things are hopeless, then there are no opportunities because you can't see them. And I think that's one of the other things for me about leadership is it's part of your role to give people the confidence that there is a way through it. We might not know what it is at this moment, but together we're going to work on it and we'll find a way and
Yeah.
unleash that creativity, that solution finding capacity that we all have, rather than it's all gloom and doom. And it's one of the reasons I think that, the media have got a lot to answer for, not only because they encourage comparisonitis, which I think is a more deadly virus than Ebola,
Yeah.
because we're not necessarily comparing with reality. The photographs being airbrushed, people are only telling you about, looking at social media. I don't want it to be a moaning shop, but actually, so many people only talk about the good bits that there are. When you talk to others, they think, well, something must be wrong with me because I haven't got that many good bits. I've got challenges.
Yeah.
When the reality is, even the most successful people have challenges because that's
Yep.
part of life.
Yep. I agree 100%. And so tell me, I know that you have share more about what you're doing, what you're bringing into the world, because I really want people to hear about both the online and the live. And you've got your hand in so many beautiful
Oh, thank you.
creations.
I've got a stable of books. So for me, if we look at it from, there's a lot of free stuff. If people go onto the website, genuinely-you.com, and Gina Gardner Associates.co.uk, there's lots of free stuff, lots of free films on videos on YouTube, and love your listeners to go and subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is Genuinely You with Gina Gardner. So there's lots of free stuff. But then there are books, and I published between 35 and 40 books. And a lot of those latterly have been intentional journals and workbooks. So they share a principle, some strategies, and then they give you the opportunity through journaling or through workbooking to actually put those into place so that they, for over 30 or 60 days, there's a structure to help you implement those. They're very inexpensive because for me, this has to be accessible to people,
Yep.
whatever. There are also a whole range of online, do it at your own speed, um, uh, products online in terms of learning a whole range of things about leadership. If you're an empath or think that you're an empath, there's a lot of stuff for empaths. I do a lot of work with empaths, but also about life and health and well-being. So, for example, there's a book and a series of videos which are about living with long-term illness or disability, including COVID. using my own experience and, some of the strategies that I've used for myself, and also with people who are trying to help you,
Yeah.
because it can feel overwhelming. So lots of
Mhm.
books, lots of online, do things at your own speed. I've also got an accredited 10-month leadership program accredited by the UK Continuous Professional Standards Office, and that can count for CPD. And that's a mixture of online and one-on-one coaching and group coaching. So that's a facility that's open to people. I run mastermind groups for leaders, which are groups between 4 and 8, where you can really get to know people. You've got the expertise of the people themselves and also myself. So people can bring anything to the party. We're just starting those
Yeah.
next month. And so there's the opportunity for people to be engaged in a very small group within that. And then I do one-on-one coaching. But it's for people who really feel ready to accelerate their journey, both personally or as a leader. And then I've got my radio show, and the opportunity there to listen to amazing people like yourself who are sharing their wisdom, and also that within that conversation, it's not an interview in the sense of just questioning people. It's a dialogue, so that there's a two-way process there, and that's getting a huge audience. So we're reaching more and more people, and hopefully I've got a TV show that'll be coming out sometime this year. And we're just waiting to know which platforms it's going to go on. So lots of different opportunities, and love to hear from you, from your followers, and if they need any help, I'm very happy to do that.
That's brilliant. So if I am an emerging leader, if I'm a new leader, I've been moved into a position of responsibility, I have a team that reports to me, where would you direct them? What would be the best resource for them?
There are certainly a number of books. I've got a series of leadership books from emerging leaders, emerging, authentic, limitless, and profitable leaders, and those are intentional workbooks. I've got the first 2 books that I wrote, which were a distillation of all of the practical strategies that I used when I was a principal, and that's Kickstart Your Career. That's for people who are at the beginning of their career.
Yeah.
And the second one, How to Manage Your Staff More Effectively. But then also online, there are leadership. So how to be uh, ha communication, for example, how to be an authentic leader. There is an in the box course that you can use to enhance what's on in the book. There's a whole range of different themes. Um, but then if you are really ambitious and you want to get ahead and you want to invest in yourself, then working one-on-one, because then we can really expand and accelerate your very specific journey. And so best to email me at Gina@genuinely-you, and we can talk about that. If you're just an emerging leader, then the mastermind groups are not for you, but the expanded leadership program would be great for anybody at any experience, because it takes you from where you're at to where you want to go.
Beautiful. And that's what I was going to mention. So that's for our emerging or new to leadership individuals. And then you have this mastermind,
Yes.
this ability to work um, individually with senior leadership
Yes.
and with companies. Am I right?
Absolutely. And so, and with the companies that I've worked with, I always work with the senior leaders,
Yeah.
but ultimately then work with their middle managers as well, sometimes with the whole staff. It depends on the organization size and needs.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the things that strikes me is that if you've got a bigger company and you really want to make a significant difference that embeds quickly, then having several people go through the program at the same time, so that the language that they're speaking becomes embedded into your culture, then that's
Yeah.
the way to get the biggest impact, I think, where you've got multiple people, because, you know, people go on a course, the statistics are a bit scary. And people go on a course and within 6 months, they're only using 7% of what they've learned.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've got multiple people going through the same program, then the statistics are very different, because that keeps the thing alive and generates even greater development.
And I think too, when you add in the personal aspect where they would bring you in as a touchstone to reinforce, to reassess, to reinvest those knowledge points in the company. And I want to make sure and mention that, you know, Gina's in the UK, I'm here in the United States on the West Coast, but this is anywhere in the world. You can be anywhere. I think we now recognize we're a global community with a common cause, and that is to enlighten leadership and to make the world a better place. And I also want to, and my intuition is saying I need to share this, that start with a department and facilitate the change within that department, and then start to hop around the company and create a more holistic conversation.
I think if it's a very big company, then that's a really great way to start. I think a lot depends on the size of the company, but
Yeah,
ultimately this has to be holistic. You
yeah,
know, and one of the reasons why I think it's so important to start with the decision makers is, if you have, so often they want to tick a box and they send their middle managers off to do a course, and they come back, but the culture's the same. And so they can't affect any sort of development and change, because they're going back into the very environment. And I'm not saying change for change's sake, but if you really want to move things from a profit-led culture, which I think is dying,
yeah,
to a purpose-led culture where your people feel valued and engaged and have ownership of your vision, and that you as a company want to make a positive difference internally and with your clients and your customers, then the culture has to be one of, how are we going to make a positive difference? And I think your skilled people will vote with their feet rather.
yeah.
If your company doesn't value them, nurture them and grow them. And research has shown that that actually has much more impact than how much you pay people,
Hmm.
because they spend a lot of time at work. They want to feel that their contribution is valued.
And makes a difference in the world, that it's not,
Absolutely. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. We hire to fill a slot. But when we bring the human in, we need to be curious and understand what's their greatest value to the company, and a the culture
absolutely.
needs to be purpose driven to allow that.
And
Yeah,
if you don't have people at the top who are making the ultimate decisions engaged in that, if they're only interested in servicing their shareholders, then you
yeah,
have got a complete disconnect. Now, their shareholders are important, but interestingly, when you create a holistic approach, it may not initially be as quick, but ultimately they make more profit and it's sustainable. And
yes,
so for me, that's the big sea change that needs to happen.
yeah. This was an absolutely brilliant conversation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The contribution you're making to change the landscape of our corporations is vital in how we change our world, because, as you said, we spend so much time at our job.
We do indeed. And if
Yeah,
you're spending time and you feel that what you're doing is making a positive contribution, then on those dark grey days when you'd like a duvet day, you're going to be not one of those people who are contributing to the presenteeism problem. You're going to get up and you're going to be enthusiastic and creative, aren't you? In a way
yeah,
that you wouldn't do if you think, well, nobody's going to bother, nobody cares whether I'm there or not.
yeah. So if you want to work with Gina, and I can't see why you wouldn't, I am going to make sure and include places that you can find her, her websites, and her resources, because I believe, just as Gina does, that by changing our corporate environments, we will change the world. And ultimately, it has to come from within us, self responsibility. Any last words, Gina?
Just ultimately, you are the common denominator in your life. And you have a choice how you're going to turn up moment by moment. And so, you know, the opportunities you're giving your listeners is something very special. And you either choose to do something with it or you don't. But if
Yeah,
you don't take action, then nothing's going to change.
100% agree. Thank you very much, my friend.
Oh, thank you.